I remember the morning like it was yesterday, though it was 78 years ago. Damp fog lay over the fields outside Bastogne, so thick you could barely see the men a few feet away. I was on my hands and knees, lacing up my boots, the leather stiff and cold. The smell of mud clinging to my socks. My watch, my father's old Waltham, scratched and dented, rested beside me in the grass. I wound it slowly, though I knew the time didn't matter. Not that day. Not after what I did. I can't write my name. Not anymore. Not in connection with this story. Maybe someone will read this and understand, or maybe I'll just let it disappear like I had tried to disappear from that forest. But I have to get it off my chest before my time runs out. I carried something that day, something I shouldn't have, and it's never left me. I was part of a small infantry unit, 50 men, maybe fewer by that morning. The air smelled of frost, gunpowder residue, and the faint tang of blood from days past. Corporal Harlan, Harl for short, was crouched beside me, cleaning his rifle. He'd been my friend since basic, a quiet man, steady hands, a sort of stubborn humor that kept us all from cracking. I glanced at him. He nodded at the watch. "Still ticking, huh?" he said. A simple line, but it steadied me for a moment. Orders had come down just before dawn. Hold the northern edge of the woods. Prevent any push from the Germans. Nothing fancy. Standard stuff. But by the time we reached the trees, we realized the line was thinner than anyone had admitted. Half the squad was already pinned down by machine gun fire. We could hear the whistle of bullets overhead, the snap of branches as men fell. Though none of us dared look too long, I spotted it then. A small flare of white light, a signal someone had fired from the other side. Something in me said it wasn't just a signal, something instinctual. My father's watch ticked beside me as I hesitated. Harl muttered, "You see it too?" I nodded, but I didn't say what I thought. I didn't move. I held my position while the rest of the squad scattered into the trees, the chaos wrapping us like smoke. I made a choice that morning. I chose to stay where I was. I kept the watch tucked into my coat, checked its hands obsessively, listened to its tiny tick instead of moving forward. And in doing that, I ignored a man calling for help. I can't tell you his name. I never learned it. The moment is burned into my memory. A muffled scream, a sharp crack, and the whistle of the wind over the pines. Harl wanted to go, wanted to help, but I froze him with a hand on his shoulder. "We move on my mark," I whispered, though I had no plan to act. I can't explain why I stayed behind. I told myself it was caution, strategy, prudence. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe it was both. Either way, that small private decision, the one I never speak of, shifted everything. We survived the morning, Harl and I, but the rest. I still see the empty spaces where they should have been. By noon, we'd regrouped in a shell-blasted clearing. The smell of wet earth and burnt wood was thick. Harl lit a cigarette from a tin we carried, the smell curling up into the frost. I watched the smoke drift, small and fragile, wondering how something so simple could feel like comfort. The watch ticked again. I kept checking it. A habit, a tether to life, a reminder that time moves, even when men die. There's a detail I've never told anyone. Not my wife, not my kids, not Harl, even. Something I saw in those woods, something I should have acted on, but didn't. I kept it to myself, and it grew inside me, a small, heavy stone that never stops rolling. I can feel it now, even here, decades later. As I write this letter, no one will sign. We walked back to the rendezvous point that afternoon, Harl's hand brushing mine on a fallen log, giving silent reassurance. I looked down at my boots, still mud-stained, and at the watch, still ticking. I wanted to tell him, wanted to say, I saw him. I saw it all, and I didn't move. But the words wouldn't come. Not then. Not ever. I left Bastogne with Harl, yes, but part of me stayed behind in that fog. Part of me never left. I'm not proud of that morning. I'm not proud of what I did, or didn't do. And there's a secret waiting in the woods, a truth I can't reconcile with my own survival. I suppose this is where I begin. I suppose this is why I'm writing at all. I need to put down what I can't carry anymore. And what I can't carry, I fear, might be more than a lifetime of guilt. The forest didn't let up. That afternoon, as we moved toward the ridge where our company was supposed to regroup, the fog thinned just enough to reveal the damage. Trees splintered like matchsticks. The ground churned with mud and debris. And the air smelled of cordite and something worse. Something like fear made visible. Harl stayed close, silent mostly, but every so often he'd glance at me with that knowing look. He knew something had shifted, though he didn't press. We found the rest of the unit in a shell-blasted orchard. Some faces I recognized, some I didn't. Some I thought I'd never see again. There was shouting, the usual scramble to organize positions, but I kept to the edges. My watch tucked against my chest, its tick the only reassurance I had. I could feel Harl's eyes on me every time someone asked questions I couldn't answer. And then I saw him. The first one. He wasn't supposed to be there, wasn't supposed to be alive, or at least I'd thought he wasn't. He limped along the ridge, helmet knocked sideways, uniform torn, eyes wide in shock. I froze. Harl nudged me, low and urgent. We help him or we don't. Your call. My stomach knotted. I wanted to step forward, to grab him, to fix it, but I stayed rooted, watching him stagger past, thinking, if I move, I risk it all. The watch ticked. I counted the seconds like a confession, one tick for every choice I refused to make. There's a truth in numbers, or at least in repetition. Each tick reminded me that I had survived while others didn't, that I had prioritized my own caution over action. And in that pause, the ridge erupted. Mortar fire cracked the orchard in half, dirt and splinters showering down like rain. I grabbed Harl's arm, pulling him into a ditch, my ears ringing, my heart hammering. The soldier I'd seen, his figure disappeared under smoke and dirt. I didn't know if he survived, and I didn't look to find out. I couldn't. My inaction had already written the ledger for that day. By evening, we had a small perimeter set up. Harl tried to speak, then stopped himself, staring at the mud-caked boots we shared stories of cleaning together back at camp. I thought about that morning, the first choice, and the soldier I hadn't helped. I felt a sudden hollow weight in my chest. Do you ever think about it? Harl finally whispered. I shook my head, though I did think about it. Every hour, every day, every time that watch ticked. Something else surfaced then, a faint smell, metallic and sharp. I crouched near the edge of the perimeter, sniffing the air. It brought me back to the woods, to the scream I'd ignored, to the choice I'd made. A civilian, an old man, appeared from behind a shattered wall of bricks, his hands raised, eyes wide. Harl motioned for me to stay back. I stayed. I didn't trust myself to act properly, to do what was right. He said nothing, just stared. The forest and orchard had quieted into an uneasy lull, and in that pause, I understood the full weight of what I had carried. Survival had a price, and sometimes that price was a life I could neither save nor forget. I turned my watch over in my hands, its tick too loud. Each second a reminder that time had moved without me acting. That night, when we tried to rest in the shell of an abandoned farmhouse, I couldn't sleep. The fire crackled, shadows jumping along the walls. Harl's steady breathing beside me, and I kept imagining what would have happened if I had acted differently. One small choice, and maybe we'd all be alive, or maybe we'd all be dead. I didn't know, and the not knowing gnawed at me more than any bullet. I kept the watch under my pillow, a habit, a comfort, and a penance all at once. And in the corner of that room, half hidden in the dark, I glimpsed movement again. Something or someone was watching. I didn't move. I didn't call out. I only waited, listening to the tick, thinking about the morning, and wondering if the soldier I hadn't helped was the one out there, or if something else had noticed me instead. I realized then that the day's choices weren't done with me. They had followed me into the night, like shadows that would never leave, whispering that the story wasn't over, that the secret was still alive in those woods. The dawn came gray and low, the kind that makes the woods look endless, the trees like dark skeletons. I woke first, shivering in my damp coat, the watch still tucked into my palm. Harl was stirring beside me, his face pale in the weak light. We hadn't slept much. Couldn't sleep, not really. Every snap of a branch outside made me flinch. Every distant crack of artillery reminded me that nothing we did mattered much in the grand scale, yet everything mattered all at once. We were sent forward that morning to scout the edge of the village. A simple patrol, Harl called it. A simple patrol, he said, but we both knew the word simple was a lie. I kept the watch in my coat pocket, pressing it occasionally, the ticking too loud in the quiet. It was my anchor, my confession, my only companion. Halfway to the ridge, we stumbled across tracks, boot prints in the mud, fresh, German, moving toward the village. Harl signaled me to follow quietly. We crept along, and then I saw it. A small group of men, no more than 4, rounding the corner of a shattered wall. One carried a rifle loosely in his hands, but they weren't moving fast. They were careless. Harl nudged me, whispering, "We could take them. Quick, no one'll know." I stared at him, at the tracks, at the ridge beyond. I thought of the soldier I hadn't helped, of the scream that still echoed in my mind. I wanted to act. I wanted to do something right, even if it was small. But my hands stayed at my sides, tight and useless. Something shifted then. A flash. A shadow at the corner of my vision. One of the enemy soldiers stumbled into a ditch. A grunt. A muffled crash. Harl froze, eyes wide. Did you see that?" I shook my head, though I had seen it. A civilian, a young boy, appeared from the rubble behind them. He had no weapon, just wide eyes, and he pointed at us, trembling. I felt my stomach tighten. Harl's hand rested on his rifle, a small tremor running down his arm. What do we do?" he asked. I could see it in him. The split between duty and morality, the exact place where the choices cut the deepest, and I made a choice. I stepped back. I let them go. The enemy soldiers, confused by the sudden movement, turned and ran. The boy ducked behind a wall, silent, trembling. Harl cursed softly under his breath. We could have ended them. We could have stopped them before they reached the ridge. My chest tightened. I didn't argue. I didn't offer excuses. The choice had been mine, and I had frozen again. We continued on, the ridge rising ahead, the fog lifting slowly, revealing the shattered village beyond. The sounds of distant artillery and muffled shouting came to us in broken pieces, like fragments of a nightmare. I thought of the soldier I'd ignored, of the boy who'd watched us, of the choices that kept piling on. I felt that small, heavy stone in my chest again. When we reached the edge of the village, I noticed a church tower, its bell smashed, windows blown out. Smoke rose from the streets, thin and curling. And then I saw something that made me stop dead. A man lying on the cobblestones, motionless, a rifle at his side. He was American, one of ours. And just like that, the weight of inaction pressed down harder than ever. Harl crouched beside me. "We need to get him," he whispered, voice strained. But the street was open, exposed. I could see the German patrols moving in the distance, hear their voices drifting through the fog. Every instinct screamed to run, to stay low. Every moral instinct screamed to help him. I didn't move. I felt the watch tick against my chest. I could feel every second, every choice, every cowardly hesitation. I'd survived again. Harl pulled me back into the shadow of a wall, shaking his head. "I don't understand you," he muttered. And I didn't understand me either. We stayed in the shadows, watching the soldier on the street, knowing he might die, knowing we could save him, knowing we were trapped by our own indecision. I glanced down at the watch again, its tick loud and insistent. I realized that the weight I carried was growing, and that this morning, this moment, would be just another confession I'd never speak aloud. The fog shifted, revealing more movement, and I knew with a cold certainty that what I had done, or hadn't done, was only the beginning. The ridge, the village, the boy, the soldier. They were all threads in something I didn't yet understand, and I could feel that the next choice, the next action, or inaction, would change everything. The orders came just as the sun broke through the clouds, weak and gray. Captain Renshaw, our company commander, stood in the ruined square, coat dusted with mud, voice clipped and sharp. "We'll push through the village," he barked. "Secure the north end by nightfall. No excuses." His eyes swept over us like a net, and I felt Harl tense beside me. I knew he'd been hoping for some discretion, some small mercy. There was none. We moved as a unit, boots sinking in mud, rifles ready. The church tower loomed ahead, skeletal against the sky. Smoke and dust drifted from shattered windows, carrying a faint metallic tang. My watch ticked steadily in my pocket. Every second a reminder that time was moving, whether I acted or not. Halfway through the square, I saw him again. The soldier from earlier, sprawled near the rubble of a collapsed wall. He hadn't moved. I froze, my stomach twisting. Harl noticed immediately. "He's still alive," he whispered. "We can't just leave him." I didn't answer. I didn't dare. My hands were slick with cold sweat. I kept the watch clutched in my palm, its tick a heartbeat I could almost trust. Captain Renshaw called out, "Move it, men," and I felt the pressure of obedience pressing down. Orders didn't ask questions. Orders didn't weigh the moral cost. Harl stepped forward, ready to drag the man back into cover. But I put my hand on his arm. "Wait," I said, though I didn't know why. I could feel my own fear, my own hesitation, holding both of us in place. The German patrol we'd seen earlier appeared on the far street, cautious but advancing. My stomach sank. If we moved for the soldier, we'd expose ourselves. If we stayed, we'd watch him die. I thought of the boy we'd passed yesterday, of the soldier I'd let fall in the woods, of all the times I'd frozen when action mattered. The weight pressed down harder than ever. Harl's eyes searched mine. "We can't leave him," he said, voice low but urgent. I shook my head. My reasoning was cold and clinical. Too many variables, too much risk. But deep down, I knew it was fear, pure and simple. I wanted to survive. I wanted to follow orders. I wanted to justify myself, even if justification was a lie. A shot rang out from the ridge, sharp and close. The soldier twitched, then lay still. My stomach knotted tighter. Harl cursed, fists trembling. "God damn it," he muttered. I didn't look away. I didn't move. I didn't argue. I just held the watch, feeling its tick, feeling the small, heavy stone inside me grow heavier. We advanced under Renshaw's orders, passing the motionless body. No one spoke. Not Harl. Not me. The weight of that moment settled over us like a cloud. I could see in Harl's eyes the question he would never ask aloud. Why didn't you save him? And I could feel the answer in my chest, sharp and bitter. Because I was afraid. Because I chose myself over him. Again. By the time we reached the north end of the village, nightfall was approaching. The fog rolled back in, softening the edges of shattered walls and twisted metal. I kept the watch clutched against my chest, feeling the seconds tick by, knowing each one carried the echo of choices I could never undo. Harl stayed close, silent, his presence both comfort and reminder. That night, we huddled in the shell of a burned-out house. Harl smoked from the tin, the scent curling around us, grounding me in the small, familiar rituals that survived chaos. I stared at the watch, its face scratched, hands moving relentlessly. And I thought again of the soldier in the square, of the boy, of the woods. I wondered if some part of me had stayed behind with them, trapped in my indecision, waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for confession. I realized then, fully and painfully, that survival wasn't the victory I had imagined. It was a sentence, and with every tick of the watch, that sentence grew longer, stretching across decades, echoing in silence, in memories, in letters no one would ever read. I could feel the next day coming, heavy with unknowns, and I knew the choices would not get easier. The village, the ridge, the shadows of men I hadn't saved. They were all waiting for me, and the question that had haunted me since Bastogne whispered again, is surviving enough when you leave others behind? The next morning broke cold and gray, like the day before. A light mist hung over the village, seeping through shattered windows and curling around fallen beams. I woke to the smell of damp wood and the faint metallic tang that had become constant in my memory. Harl was already awake, crouched in a corner, rifling through our small pack, muttering under his breath. I could see the worry etched in his face. He didn't need to speak. I already felt it too. Orders came down again. Scout the west perimeter. Nothing fancy, Captain Renshaw said. Keep moving. Report back. I kept the watch in my pocket, its tick like a pulse I could cling to. It reminded me I was alive, that I could still act, or still fail. We moved through the village, debris crunching under our boots, every corner hiding shadows. And then I saw them, the remnants of the German patrol from yesterday. 2 men, scouting ahead, unaware of our presence. Harl raised his rifle without hesitation. He was ready to act. I froze again. I watched as he pulled back the bolt, as the barrel leveled, and I realized I could intervene, stop him from making a choice that might kill, and I didn't. The moment stretched, heavy and slow. The soldiers passed, oblivious, leaving the street empty again. Harl lowered the rifle, muttering under his breath. I said nothing. I couldn't. That was the pattern now. Watch, hesitate, survive, guilt. The watch ticked in my pocket. Every second, a drumbeat of my failures. Further down the street, we found the boy again. He was crouched in the ruins of a shop, eyes wide, clutching a tattered blanket. When he saw us, he didn't run. He didn't scream. He only stared. Harl knelt beside him. "It's okay," he said softly. I stayed back, my hands in my coat, gripping the watch. The boy's gaze shifted to me. Questioning, searching, and I felt the weight of everything I hadn't done. We were not supposed to take civilians with us. Orders were clear. But Harl looked at me, silently asking, and I, again, paused. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to help, but I didn't. I stepped back. Survival again outweighed morality. The boy stayed in the ruins, and we left him there. By midday, the perimeter had shifted. Enemy forces were consolidating on the ridge above the village. Mortar fire began again, distant but growing louder. I felt each explosion in my chest, a drumbeat of consequences I could not escape. I thought of the soldier in the square, of the one in the woods, of the boy, and of the weight I carried with Harl at my side. Harl finally spoke as we crouched behind a shattered wall. "I don't get you," he said quietly, voice shaking with frustration and fear. "You see it, you know it, but you freeze every time." I didn't answer. The truth was ugly and small. I acted out of fear, out of self-preservation, and now it was more than fear. It was habit, a reflex that had saved my life but ruined everything else. I checked the watch again. Its tick was loud, insistent, relentless, and I realized that the choice we faced next, whether to hold the ridge or retreat, was not just a tactical one. It was moral. Every second I hesitated, I risked more lives. Every second I moved, I risked mine. The weight of indecision had become heavier than any rifle, louder than any shell. And as I pressed the watch to my chest, I wondered if I could ever forgive myself for what I had let happen. The sun dipped low, the ridge casting long shadows over the village, and I knew the next engagement would demand action, whether I was ready or not. The question hung between Harl and me, unspoken but understood. Will I act when it matters, or will I freeze again? The ridge was quiet when we reached it, the kind of quiet that made your ears ring and your skin crawl. Smoke from the village drifted upward, curling around shattered trees, carrying the scent of mud, gunpowder, and something I can't name. Harl and I huddled behind a broken stone wall, rifles ready, eyes scanning the tree line. The rest of the company was spread thin, half hidden by fog, half by fear. We didn't have long before the Germans arrived in force. Their voices carried through the mist, shouting orders, boots crunching over frozen earth. I felt the familiar knot in my stomach, the same one from Bastogne, the woods, the square, the boy. I gripped the watch in my hand. Its ticking was deafening. Every second was a reminder that hesitation was no longer just a choice. It could cost lives. A young private near us froze, rifle trembling in his hands. Harl leaned over him. "You either move, or you die, son. Make your choice." I could see myself in that private, years younger, scared, indecisive. And I realized then that the weight I carried wasn't just my own. It was all the men I'd survived with, all the ones I'd failed. The first shots rang out, and chaos erupted. Men screamed, shouted, fell. Mortar fire shook the ridge, sending chunks of earth and stone tumbling. I ducked behind the wall, pressing the watch to my chest. It was the only thing that reminded me I was alive, that measured the seconds I had left to act. Then I saw him, the same soldier from the square, the one I had left behind. He was crawling toward cover, blood staining his sleeve. I felt my throat tighten. Harl's eyes found mine. "We can't just let him die," he said. And I knew this was it, the moment I could no longer freeze. I could no longer hide behind hesitation. I grabbed my rifle, and we moved together, low and fast, toward him. Bullets whistled past us, splintering wood and stone. Harl pulled the soldier into cover. He was barely conscious, but alive. Relief should have flooded me. But instead, I felt the familiar pang of guilt. I had waited too long. I had survived while others had not. The firefight intensified. I watched Harl return fire, saw men fall, and felt the weight of every previous inaction pressing down on me. I wanted to save everyone. I wanted to be the man who finally made the right choice. But the ridge was a gauntlet, and for every soldier I helped, another needed me. I realized, fully and painfully, that I could not save them all. The watch ticked in my pocket. I pressed it against my palm, feeling the rhythm, feeling my heart trying to keep pace. Each tick was a reminder that time was moving forward, that life and death waited for no one, that every choice, or refusal to choose, had consequences. By nightfall, the ridge was ours, but only barely. Bodies lay scattered, some ours, some theirs. The soldier from the square was stable, thanks to Harl, but the memory of all I had left behind, the ones I hadn't saved, was with me. I felt it in every aching muscle, every tremor in my hands, every tick of the watch. That night, as we huddled in the shadow of a ruined barn, I finally spoke to Harl. I froze. Again. Every time it mattered, I froze. He didn't answer. He just lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the darkness. I pressed the watch to my chest, feeling the weight of decades of inaction and the small, heavy stone that had grown inside me since Bastogne. I realized then that survival was not enough. It had never been enough. And the ridge, the village, the boy, the soldier, they would haunt me until my last breath. Every tick of the watch reminded me. Every shadow whispered the truth I had never admitted. I had survived, yes, but at what cost? The morning after the ridge fight was eerily calm. The mist hung low over the village, the kind that made the ruins look like ghostly shapes frozen in time. Harl and I moved quietly, checking our perimeter, the soldier from the square leaning on Harl for support. The air smelled of wet earth, cordite, and decay. I kept my hand on the watch in my pocket, feeling its tick like a metronome counting every mistake I'd made. We found the remnants of our company gathered in a ruined courtyard. Few spoke. Most were too exhausted, too haunted, or too afraid. I saw faces I remembered from training, from early patrols, and I noticed how many were gone. And then I understood something I'd been avoiding. Survival wasn't a gift. It was a burden. Harl nudged me toward a small pile of letters we had scavenged from abandoned homes. One caught my eye, a child's drawing, smudged with dirt, pinned to the wall with a nail. It was of a soldier, smiling, standing next to a small house. I stared at it, thinking of the boy in the ruins, thinking of the soldier in the square, thinking of all the lives I hadn't touched, hadn't saved. My watch ticked relentlessly, louder than the distant echoes of gunfire. Captain Renshaw gave orders to move out, to consolidate our position. I followed mechanically, Harl beside me, but I could feel the tension between us, the quiet judgment, the unspoken question. Why do you keep surviving while others fall? I didn't answer. I had no answer that would satisfy him or myself. Later, we stumbled upon another body, a man from our unit, one I knew well, now lying twisted in the mud. Harl gasped and knelt beside him, trying to find a pulse. I stayed back, gripping the watch, feeling its tick like a tiny heartbeat I could control. I wanted to move, to help, to do something right, but I froze. Again. The afternoon dragged on with scouting and firefights, each encounter testing the limits of fear and morality. Every time I hesitated, every time I chose survival over action, I felt the stone in my chest grow heavier. I saw it reflected in Harl's eyes, disappointment, frustration, a quiet anger. I tried to justify my choices, prudent caution, following orders. That night, we huddled in a crumbling church, the walls blackened by fire. Harl lit a cigarette, the scent mingling with dust and damp. I pressed the watch to my chest and thought about all the moments I had frozen, all the soldiers, All the civilians, all the civilians, all the boys and men who had counted on me in some small way. And I had failed. Harl finally spoke. "You got to tell me what's going on in that head of yours," he said, voice low. "I've seen you hesitate before. Every time, it's the same. What are you carrying?" I swallowed hard. I wanted to tell him everything. The woods, the square, the boy, but I couldn't. Not yet. Some confessions were too heavy, even for Harl. I only pressed the watch tighter. The night stretched, shadows moving like ghosts across the walls. I felt the weight of everything. The ridge, the village, the soldier, the boy. Pressing down, and I knew I was running out of time. Not for survival, but for truth. The stone in my chest was too heavy, and I feared the next choice would be my last chance to act, or my last chance to live with myself. And then, from the darkness outside, I heard movement. Something or someone was coming. Harl reached for his rifle, eyes sharp. I pressed the watch against my palm, feeling its tick, knowing that the next few minutes would test everything I'd learned, or failed to learn, about courage, morality, and survival. The movement in the shadows became clearer as the fog thinned. Shapes emerged, figures moving cautiously along the ruins of the courtyard. I pressed my hand against the watch, its tick loud in my ears, as if counting down the seconds I had left to make a choice. Harl whispered, "Stay low. Let's see who they are." But I already knew. It was them, the remnants of the German patrol. And beyond them, the soldiers I had left behind in my hesitations, in my frozen moments. The soldier from the square, the one Harl had saved, was with us now, leaning heavily on Harl. I looked at him and thought of all the others I hadn't helped. All the moments I had chosen caution over courage. The weight in my chest was unbearable, and yet I couldn't look away. This was the reckoning I had delayed for decades. Captain Renshaw appeared beside us, voice low but sharp. "We hold here. No retreats. Every man counts." I nodded, though I felt nothing but dread. Harl glanced at me, searching for the man I had once been. Or perhaps for a man who could finally act. I wanted to be that man. I wanted to fix the past. But the past is not fixable. It only waits. The enemy moved closer, shadows stretching across the broken walls. I could see the fear in the young private beside us, the tension in Harl's hands on the rifle, the silent pleading in the eyes of the soldier we had saved. I pressed the watch tighter, its ticking a frantic heartbeat, echoing in my chest. Every second demanded action. Every second reminded me of every choice I had refused to make. And then it happened. A shot rang out from the east, hitting the earth just feet from us. Harl shouted, taking cover, pulling the soldier with him. I froze for a heartbeat, long enough to remember every time I had frozen before. But something inside me shifted. I realized that this moment was not just about survival. It was about redemption, however small, however late. I moved. I raised my rifle, aimed, and fired. One German soldier fell, then another. Harl covered me, the three of us moving in a desperate, careful rhythm through the ruin. The fog masked our movements, but not our fear, not the weight of every life we had left behind. Each step was a confession, each breath a silent apology. By dawn, the ridge was quiet. The village lay in ruins, but we were alive. The soldier from the square, the young private Harl, and I, scarred, exhausted, trembling. We had survived, but I could not feel victory. The stone in my chest had grown lighter in the firefight, perhaps, but it was not gone. It would never be gone. That night, we huddled in what remained of a farmhouse. Harl lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the cold air. I held the watch, worn and scratched, and realized that it had been more than a measure of time. It had been a witness, a keeper of my choices, a reminder of what I had failed to do and what I had finally tried to do. I know now that some debts are never paid. Some confessions can never be fully made. I survived, yes, but at the cost of countless small failures, moments of hesitation, and choices I can never undo. The soldier I left in the square, the boy in the ruins, the men in the woods, they are with me every day. I do not sleep through their memories. I carry them like the watch, close to my chest, ticking, ticking, ticking. If you are reading this, perhaps you will ask yourself, would you have done differently? Is following orders enough to be innocent? I cannot answer for you. I can only confess for myself, here, in these words, unsigned, unclaimed, and perhaps finally free from silence. The ridge, the village, the fog, they are all behind me now. And yet they will always be ahead. The watch rests in my hand. Its tick is steady. Its tick is the reminder that life moves forward, even for men like me, even when time carries the weight of all we failed to save. I am near the end, and I finally understand. Survival is not a gift. It is a burden, and I have carried it every second for all these years.